Okay, so now let's talk about how you get into the idea of character performance, and specifically how you would go about blocking out a pantomime shot. Essentially, when I'm talking about blocking out a shot, I mean, how do you begin? How do you get your main poses figured out so that your animation process runs smoothly and efficiently? And one of the most important things that I hope that you will learn from this course is how to adopt a good work method for animation. That is to say, how you find a work method so that when you go to a studio and somebody says, animate a character doing a high five, doing a chest bump, and then spinning a girl around and dropping her, that you don't think, my goodness, I'll never be able to do that. But instead you think, okay, I have the tools I need to be able to figure out an approach to making that work and block it out and get it to a happy conclusion. Now, the trouble with animation is that we get nothing for free. Unlike live action, where you go out and shoot footage and you edit it together, you begin as an animator in the old days with a blank sheet of paper, and nowadays with a blank screen. You might import the rig, but the rig isn't going to give you anything either. The rig is just going to sit there and stare at you. So you need to have a pretty good plan figured out before you start animating. The important thing is not to panic, and it's very easy to panic when you're beginning because you think, I really have no idea how to go about doing this. But what you need is a plan. And the reason I've got an architect's drawing here is because the secret of good animation is in the planning. And in the same way that you would not start building a building by simply piling bricks one on top of the other, you would start with a proper architectural drawing. So it is with animation. We don't just go into Maya and start posing the character. You always want a plan so that when you start doing your character poses, you've already figured out the shot in advance. Now, if you're working on a feature film, you're going to watch the story reels, also called the animatic, and you'd think about the shot in context. You would also check the continuity. You'd check whoever's animating the shots in front of you and the one behind you. You might also check the storyboards, which can be an incredibly useful source of good poses. And sometimes if the storyboard artist has really done their job well, then you can actually use those as your key poses in the shot. Now, you don't have access to those things because you're working on a personal project of your own. So this is really your starting point. And that is to say, you've got to think about what you're doing. And you've got to try and imagine it in your head. And this is the most important thing to do in animation, is to figure out what it is that you want to do, come up with an idea. And so my advice to you is sit back in your chair, close your eyes, and try and imagine what it is that you're going to do. And a friend of mine, Dave Tart, who is the animation director on The Ant Bully and has a lot of experience at Pixar, he says that you've got to act it out in your head 200 times until your body remembers the performance. So it's really all about imagining it and then seeing it in your head. Another way of getting into it, once you've imagined roughly what it is that you want to do, is to act the scene out and film yourself. And this is something you'll hear me coming back to repeatedly, but you really do want to do this. You want to act out the action, get a little video camera on a tripod, or get a friend of yours to videotape you, and act it out yourself. And do it several times. The first time you act it out, it will be bad. The second time, it will still be bad. The fourth time, it might be better. Fifth, sixth, seventh time, you might start to get into it. So don't just do it once. Keep acting it out. Keep at it. Isn't that cheating? Some people say live action reference is cheating. I say no, look at Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, one of the best performances ever done in animation, and that's based on motion capture data. So if your acting is good, then it's well worth shooting it. And even if your acting isn't that great, it'll still give you ideas for character poses. You can also find reference on YouTube, Google, all the usual sources. There's a separate video on shooting video reference of yourself, so I won't go into that in great detail here, but it's a great way of getting key character poses for your shot. The most important thing for me is drawing my thumbnails, and this is really where I plan out the shot. Now, not everyone thumbnails. Some animators don't need to. Eric Goldberg, for example, who's a great genius, did the genie in Aladdin and is one of the best animators over at Disney, doesn't thumbnail. But most people do. The great Glenn Keane thumbnails all of his stuff, and if you look at all the exercises that you've been doing so far, you'll find even a simple thing like the lamp hop, those are all thumbnails. This is all planned out in advance. all the key poses, all the timing is figured out in advance, so that when you come to animate it, you already know where you're going to go. And that's what thumbnails are for. Here's some of my thumbnails from open season, and here's some more of my thumbnails from robots. There's a really nice website, a great animator called Victor Navone, who does a lot of work at Pixar, and he has posted almost all of his thumbnails on his own personal blog. And these are mostly pantomime thumbnails. Here's Mike from Monsters Inc., and he's taking off the wrapper on a straw here, and putting it on the end of the straw, blowing it, and firing it, presumably at Sully. And these are lovely thumbnails. These thumbnails pass what I call the mum test, or the mom test if you're in America. In other words, if you showed those to your mom, if you showed your thumbnails to your mum, would she know what it is that you were planning to animate? And that's what thumbnails should be, is they should be nice and clear, and there should be a roadmap of where you're going to go. Because if you figure this stuff out at the thumbnail stage, then you won't have any trouble with your animation. And there is there are a number of separate videos on thumbnails, so go ahead and watch them all. They're all essentially case studies of different shots which have been animated using thumbnails. And then your thumbnails become your key poses. That's why it's so important, because once you've got an idea of what your thumbnails look like and a rough idea of the timing, and you can do that just by timing out the action, 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, like how long is it going to take in seconds? And then your thumbnails will become your key poses. And then you can shoot a pose test on stepped curves in Maya, and you'll have a good idea of whether your work is working or not. Once you've done that, you're then going to show your rough blocking to the director, and you're going to get feedback. And do they like your work? That's an important thing. Does the director like what you've done? You're going to have to get used to getting feedback in this business and making adjustments to your shots. And often directors won't really know what they want, but you still have to try and give it to them anyway, although it can be difficult at times. Once you've done that, you're going to go on to what we call blocking plus. So you've done your pose test on stepped curves with all your main key poses. Now you're going to start to add, you've probably done key poses and extremes in your blocking plus. So now you're going to add breakdown poses, where you're breaking things down into smaller units of time. Remember the video on keys, extremes, breakdowns, and in-betweens. Your keys and your extremes are probably what's going to go in your first rough blocking pass, and then your breakdowns you're going to add later. Blocking plus plus is where you show something to the director with really almost everything added in, and then finally you switch to spline curves in Maya and add all the refinements, overlapping action, hair, cloth, tentacles, whatever it is that you're doing, all of the extra bells and whistles. So in conclusion, you want to watch the story reels if there are any, check your continuity if it applies, check the storyboards. Those 3 things don't apply to you in this scenario, so you need to start by thinking about your shot. You need to act the scene out in your head, you need to film yourself doing it, really good, really useful, and you need to draw thumbnails, and this is the most important bit. Make your thumbnails tell the story like a graphic novel or a comic. Then time out those thumbnails. And then once you've done that, use your thumbnails to create key poses in Maya. Shoot a rough timing test using those key poses on stepped curves, and throw in some extreme positions as well. So you have your key poses and your extremes. Then get feedback on that, add your breakdown poses, get more feedback, and then spline and refine your work. So that's the basic approach to blocking out a pantomime shot. It's not so different when you're doing a lip sync shot, but obviously with lip sync you've got more guidance from the character performance of the actor. Here with pantomime, it's just you, your rig, and your own imagination. So it's really, really important to have a good work process figured out so that you don't go wrong.